Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, I want to talk about for those of you that have decided to become a new parent, specifically the moms in the crowd. You know, it is a huge upheaval in our lives. What happens when you introduce children into the mix of it? My kids are 11 and 13 at the time of this recording, so I barely remember those days because they were sleep deprived and I was exhausted, and it was a whole lot of a whole lot. So I want to simplify today, like, how do you tackle that big, massive change in your life and redefine your identity if needed as a new mother? There's changes to your schedule, there's changes to your lifestyle, there's changes to your body especially. All of these things are worth having an open and honest conversation about. So my special guest today is Nicole Lawrence, and she's a mother, a teacher, and a holder of space. Now, for 5 years now, she has facilitated embodiment workshops for women to help them claim their voice, their visibility, and their boundaries. She now blends her diverse background in somatic trauma resolution with a focus on where our language and story meet the physical body. She's also the host of the podcast Rebirth, with a mission to alchemize birth stories and the stories that we bring to motherhood into fertile soil for evolving our mothering and our lineage. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Nicole Lawrence. You know, it's true that when you become a new parent, your entire identity changes like overnight, and so much changes in all of your life, not only your schedule, but your lifestyle, your body, all the things. And identity is at the core of that. It's an integral part of being human. And there are so many stories in our lives that we tell ourselves and we tell other people. So Nicole, how do we distinguish between what is true and what isn't serving us any longer?
This is such a juicy question. I absolutely love it. And I first want to start by acknowledging that our identity is shaped by all of our life experiences, the culture we live in, our environment, and a lot of that is put onto us. And then, you know, when you're navigating a new identity as a mother, what really is happening is this internal renegotiation of who you once were, or the idea of who you once were and who you are now. And, you know, identity tells us how we should behave or how we should act or move forward in the world. And like you said, so many factors are new. And so if you have this question, if this question feels alive to you, like, what's true, what's not serving me anymore, a part of you knows what's ready to be let go of. A part of you knows that there's the story that's old, that wants to be seen, that wants to be let go. And I also want to speak about just our relationship in our culture with beginnings and endings. We want to, you know, move forward really fast. And when things end, like it's a sad or a bad thing. And really we are nature, and we are constantly evolving just as everything else is around us. And if we embrace that, you know, as other cultures in the world do, there's lots of ritual around beginnings and endings and transitions in life, and especially around motherhood and parenthood. I mean, if this interests you, you can look it up. It's a full body of work and study, but we don't have that as much in Western society, and I do feel like that's missing. It's such a part, and you know, I'm in birth story listening school right now, and what I see is that women, you know, so much focus is on the pregnant woman, and then when the baby's born, it's an immediate shift. Everything's about the baby. And if you look at birth as a heroic journey, there's no place for her to come back and tell her hero story. You know, there's no place for her to be celebrated. It's all about the baby.
Yeah.
I'm taking this a different direction now in this question, but just to go back to the question and the language and the labels that we give to ourselves, I think that's really important to be aware of. I used to, I'll give an example. For a long time in my life, I used to identify as a survivor, and that carries an energy, and honestly, now I would not call myself a survivor because it doesn't feel alive and true in my body. Yeah. And if you think about it, if you take on the label of survivor, you're going to naturally want to find things to survive.
Right. You are wearing armor. You've got a shield up. You're going in tense and, ready to survive, to live through whatever battle, right? Everything looks like a battle.
Everything looks like a battle. Everything feels like a fight. You have your dukes up. Yeah. You're just on, like, ready to go, and you kind of got this like chip on your shoulder. And it just does not feel in alignment with me any longer. And it doesn't even need to sound like that. What if you take on the identity of a helper? Well, then you're helping. That's beautiful. But then I've also seen how that can be to the other extreme, where if you're not helping, you don't have worth. And so you fall to the wayside, and it's really hard for people who fall into that trap to help themselves, So I think it's so interesting if you look at language and the words that we need to define the world and ourselves, but what the meaning is that we make of those words and the internalization of these words that, we live into. Yeah. We behave according to these words and labels.
And I think that a lot of our identity, I like to call them anchors, the identity anchors in our lives are just built on past experiences, built on role models in our lives, so the things, the deep-rooted anchors that dropped down when I was a child influenced who I was in my 20s, 30s, and now in my 40s. I really appreciate what you said there. It's like some stories are just no longer serving you, and to have that moment of realization. And I think moments like that require us to slow down and actually witness them. Because I think what I had done in my early 20s and kind of early 30s as well was just work as much as possible and go as fast as possible. Because if you go fast, you don't have to slow down. You don't have time to slow down and look at this stuff. But when you do slow down, which can be very scary for a lot of us card-carrying type A control freaks out there, it requires that space and grace to go, wow, that's been driving the bus this whole time, and to scoop it out and, make space for something new, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that space of in between, when you have that realization, that point of realization is like, okay, well, I know that this is not serving me, but who am I to become in the future? That's up for negotiation. So where am I now? Where am I floating in this gray area? And that describes so much of, this immediate postpartum period of what is to come. I don't know. I don't even know what the next day is going to be like. Right. And yet I am so different than I was, even last month.
It's true.
So, yes.
It's true. Yeah. And there's so much great flux and change in that first couple of years of a baby being born. I mean, even during pregnancy as well. My God, your body does miraculous things. It's always amazing when I think about wow, that actually, I grew a person, two people, and somehow they made it out. Yeah, and I'm still alive. They're alive. That's incredible. Just the miracle of it all is amazing. Would you be willing and open to share a glimpse of your own birth story with us?
Yeah. And first I'll give a little glimpse of my pregnancy, since we were just talking about that. I do feel like it's relevant to what we were just talking about. I I did know that this was going to be a big deal, and so I feel like I went into a cocoon. Like I got very private.
Yeah.
I got very introspective. I started journaling much more. I I also started looking into my ancestry and and trying to understand where I came from. And with my personal history, that meant a lot to me. And just, by going there, I should just share that I lost my mom when I was young. And so there was also this questioning, like deep questioning of what does it mean to be a mother? Just this idea of connecting back to my lineage and my guides and my history, all the women before me that have done this, and trying to figure out or connect to what sort of wisdom they might have for me.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of preparation in terms of education. I read all the books that resonated with me, many podcasts. We did 2 different classes. I had a doula. And then we got to the birth. You asked me to share the birth story. So now we're at the birth. And I labored for 40 hours and we did everything that we possibly could, to, keep my body in labor. And I say that because around hour 4, I started just feeling extremely nauseous. And I was told in my education that that was only going to happen possibly during transition towards the end. But no, it hit me. My body responded in a way that it had it the entire time with every contraction. So for 2 days, basically, I was very nauseous. I couldn't keep anything down. And and so just exhausted. And is not the way I thought it would go, Yeah. And then we ended up transferring from the birth center peacefully over to the hospital in the middle of the night. And I ended up still having a vaginal birth, but it didn't look anything like what, I wanted. And I think the biggest lesson from that was you can't control life. You can educate yourself all that you want to, but there's still this magic factor. There's this, force that is just wild in life. And there's no harnessing it, And so that was a huge lesson for me and my husband because, we think A plus B equals this outcome. We're taught, work hard, do this, and this is what you get. This is what you can expect. And even, for my background, I found control and schedules and routines and order as a way to cope with difficult things in my life. And so this, being one thing that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to prepare, and the way that I know best is to approach it like that.
Yeah.
But it didn't equal the exact outcome that I wanted, but I will say it put me on a new healing trajectory to really dive deeper into myself and, to take that lesson of you can't control life into motherhood is pretty invaluable.
Yeah. And I think that thank you so much for sharing a glimpse into your birth story, truly, because I think that this is such another data point of pressure that we as women put on ourselves to have it just right. I did the same exact thing. I read all the books that I thought were important. I, made project plans and timelines and I even had, a whole manifesto for what it was going to be like inside the hospital. Every nurse probably thought I was like the craziest person on the planet because I was trying to control the environment, control the unknowns, control. And, there is something to being a good Girl Scout and always be prepared. However, like you said, there just is so much in life that you cannot control, and it's never going to get controlled. I think even the times where you try to control more is when life goes, that's hilarious. Like, that's
Totally.
It completely unravels even more, right? But I think what I'm curious about is in those delicate moments, like your birth and all of that, where things were definitely not going as planned, what did you feel like you had to scoop up from yourself? Was it a true surrender, or was there something else that you were scooping up from your identity that helped you persevere? Because I don't think I could handle 36 hours of nausea personally.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, what a beautiful question. I really appreciate you asking this. It helps me feel seen, and sharing my story and what emerged. And what I think was the biggest thing was this idea of independence. I've always prided myself on being independent.
Yeah.
It's something that I identify with very strongly. And in this birth, I really needed to rely on other people to help me get through. And I mean, we did everything we could, and I relied on them to hold the puke bag for me, give me water, tell me when and what to eat, feed it to me, rub my back, rub my shoulders, like everything, really care for me. And I will say also at the very end, we actually had kind of like I don't know, it felt like a Hollywood moment where it's like, do or die, like this, or you're going under. And it really did feel like that. And he ended up being a vacuum extraction assisted. And we had 3 tries. And the first try, it just popped right off. Oh, that's 1 try. Oh, not fair. Well, can't control it. So I guess round 2, really close, not quite there. And they're like, okay, last time. And I was just like, and I just felt like, are you kidding me? Like all of this, and this is what you just said to me. And so I just said, I need something more than that. And I rallied that entire room around me, all the people in there. My husband was behind me, and he had been helping me, from behind. Yeah. But I told him, I was like, I need you to do exactly this. Push in exactly this way, holding exactly this way. And I feel like because I used my voice, because I said, you are here to help me, because I really leaned into that, that is what got me through. And I don't think I would have had the same birth had I not gotten over myself in that way and really leaned into the support that was there.
What a beautiful message too, because how many times have we been in situations, maybe not during childbirth as per se, but in other situations in work or in life where we don't use our voice, where we sit back and we're really quiet and or worse, I did this just last week with my child, where I expect them to know what I'm thinking and then get really angry when they don't read my mind, Like, what a beautiful reminder for us to use our voice and say what we need, right? Like really genuinely to ask people for help and say what we need in a direct way, right?
Right. Right. And there's these rules that we take on. We talked about how identity and language and the influences from our past influence how we behave in the world, how we believe that we should be. And, for a while, the message that was ingrained in me was, be polite, don't cause any rift. Conflict is bad. Just, nod your head. Don't say anything. Don't be a burden, and no, in that moment, I rejected all of that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you stepped into your power too. I mean, and then, I don't think I'm revealing anything that people don't know. Baby comes out and it's like, wow, miraculous, like you need that inner fire almost. And maybe that is a different way to transmute independence, maybe. I don't know, but it's finding your true spirit and saying it with your outside voice. So I'm curious then, afterwards, baby is born, baby is healthy. How are you? How was the first 10 months of being a new mom and handling the changes of your body and all the things?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mentioned that it wasn't exactly to plan and ended up having a much rougher physical recovery than I had thought for probably about 2 months.
Yeah.
And so the first several months, I would say even close to 3 months, felt like survival mode. Like I was in a fog, time wasn't a thing. I didn't really care, or like the outside world didn't exist,
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's unique to my situation, but that's how I felt. And I remember around 3 months, the fog started to lift and I started to just notice him more and notice him for him, not just like this baby that I'm taking care of, but I started to notice and appreciate more of his nuances. And I think that's when I started coming into like ownership of this experience.
Yeah.
I think there was some shock in the beginning. And I think I started to thaw out a little bit around 3 months. So
yeah, that lines up with both of my kiddos being born. I joke about this, but it's true. Like genuinely, when you're not sleeping for more than like a couple of hours at a time, your sleep deprivation is legit and real. That you must take photos and videos of yourself and your child because you will not remember them. Like your brain is in survival mode for those first couple of months because it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it totally is.
And what about your physical body? How did you help grapple with the physical body changing and, all of that as well?
Oh gosh. Well, I definitely had to renegotiate. I felt that I've always felt like I'm a generally healthy person, and I, associate myself with health. And I remember taking a shower, and maybe it was like one of my first showers, but it was shocking to me because I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. I felt like I couldn't even stand up straight. I had stitches. I, was bleeding, which is totally normal, but, blood is not always associated with health. I just felt very broken. And I was like, I know that I just did this miraculous thing, but this is not health. That this does not feel like health. Yeah. And so there was this kind of like reconfiguring that had to, negotiate itself within me to understand, to really feel, not just mentally, but to really feel like you did an amazing thing,
Yeah.
And you grew this baby, like you said, like, isn't it miraculous? You grew this baby in your sleep. And then you birthed him, and now you're supporting him with your body solely. And how incredible. Yeah. How incredible. That is health. That is full health. I mean, he is perfectly healthy, and so am I. I just, from the outside, and I didn't feel certainly myself, but there was this like renegotiation of what health meant,
Yeah. And I think that's what's hard. Having lived overseas for 6 years in England and now back again in the States, it's very interesting to me how two different cultures speak the same language, handle childbirth and all the things very, very, very differently. Whereas when I was over in England, my children were nowhere near toddler stage, but they were older, and I'd had friends who had babies while I lived over there. There's not this incessant need to bounce back quickly that there is in the States that is either spoken or unspoken in our media, in our social media or TV or films or otherwise. I mean, in England, it's very standard. An entry-level person at a corporation, if they go and have a baby, they are typically away on paid leave for at least 6 months, if not a year after the baby is born. I remember when my firstborn was born, this was 2008, I was working part-time at the University of Texas, and also had just started the Simplifiers 5 years prior to that. I remember distinctly when I went on maternity leave at UT, they said, well, okay, Mary, you've got 6 weeks of unpaid leave, and if you don't come back within 6 weeks, we're going to replace you and put somebody else in your job. And it's like, wow, like what a different approach. Like, okay, you've had a baby, bounce back as quick as possible, because not only to your job, but to your physical body as well. Whereas it's not like that overseas or other places. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. Well, values, cultural values. I think there's a lot being shown right now in the last couple of years of our state of the world, just where there's putting profits over people.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to reckon with. It feels very personal to me, and my heart breaks for women who have to go back, even sooner than that, even sooner than 6 weeks. I can't imagine. And it is my personal belief, and it's not just my personal belief, but I feel very strongly that maternal care past the time where she gives birth is healthcare. Yeah. It's more than physical healthcare. It's mental healthcare, and it's setting our family, our children, our families, and the future of our society in our health, physical, emotional, mental health, in a positive trajectory if we just give priority, if we just give some care and thought to this crucial time.
Yeah.
And it's
both for the baby and for the mom and for the dad as well. I mean, let's not even talk about it. Paternal leave in the UK, you would usually get 2 to 3 months paid leave, So imagine, both parties are there caring for the baby full time, right? Not having to worry about their work. It's a whole other game, whereas when my kids were born, granted, I was a small business owner and I had that part-time gig at UT. I was always constantly worried about, I got to get back to work. And I think that that's hard when you're in a flux of massive change. There's no rule book and playbook for having a new baby at all. You're just
you need one more concern. And it's not just going back to work. It's like how all the cascade of things that need to happen for you to go back to work internally and externally, and schedules, and my goodness, it's a lot. Yeah. It's so much.
And to take on the physical body once again, because that's really our focus these last couple of months, is to talk about this stuff and really have honest conversations. I think it's impossible to believe that your body's just going to bounce back in a few weeks either afterwards. Is there a back, really? Because once you've gone through childbirth, it's such a massive change to your tummy, your breasts, your everything, your brain, everything. Yeah. That there is no going back. There is just, evolving forward. What are your thoughts there?
Well, again, we have, it goes back to values, and it also goes back to something we talked about in the beginning with our relationship with beginnings and endings. And, there was a lot of talk even with COVID of like going back to where we were before.
Right.
And what is it in our brains that wants to go back there? It's this clinging to this certainty, this knowing of the way things were, because the future is uncertain.
Right.
And our brains are wired for survival. They're not wired for change. They're not. And so it takes this higher functioning, this higher knowing, this understanding and trust that where we're going is better than where we've been. And it also takes action. We also have to put things in action. And so in this case, the physical body, it does take this renegotiation, kind of like I described, of what does health mean? What does health mean to you? What value do I place on other people's opinions of my body?
Yeah.
What does power mean for a woman? What does strength look like for a woman?
Yeah.
And I see that too, and in the roles and responsibilities that we're taking on and renegotiating, and how that plays into our identity as women, and it's everyone's decision, and we're all different here of whether you want to go back to work or you want to stay home. Some people don't even have that choice.
Right.
Some people do.
Right.
But I think if we really zoom out again and look at the bigger picture, what's really happening is this balance of the masculine and feminine, and what strength means, what power means. It's like this global renegotiation of settling into this idea of like, there's more strength in softness. There's more power in creation. There's more beauty in stillness. Like we're finding all of these, we're getting out of this idea that like more is better and more complex is better, and just this kind of like machinistic way of living.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Amen to that. Well, I'm curious then, how do you define grace? Like, how do you meet the transitions in your life with grace?
Yeah, I think I can simplify these actually, which is really fun for me to do, because I don't see myself as a simplifying person, but I can simplify this. The first thing is knowing your why. Knowing why you're taking this step forward, knowing what it means to you, and having an idea of where you're going or where you might want to end up.
Yeah.
Why does it matter to you? Second is related to this, but it's more specific. Know your values. So kind of like a birth plan. It's not a plan of how things are going to go. It's not a schedule, and not an itinerary. It's not a manifesto. Mary, I love you.
I know.
But it's really what it's saying. It's a statement of values, and it's used as a guide for people who don't know you to know, your boundaries, what your values are, and it can be used to navigate your decisions moving forward. And it's really what it is. Like, if this happens, I have this value, so that's how I make my decision of what to do, A or B.
Yes.
So when you know your values, there's less of this kind of floatiness, and more certainty as you move forward, and which just creates more grace.
Yes.
You have less erratic energy.
Yes. 100%.
In life. And the third thing is to stay rooted in the moment. So we talked about like, okay, we're not that person anymore. We don't know where we're going really, because we can't control, we can't predict. Lord knows we can't. But what we can do is, what we really have control over is the present moment, and what we can do in this present moment. And so just to stay rooted, and to understand that we're meant to go through change. But here we are. And a practice that I like to do with clients and myself, it's based in somatic experiencing. It's called orienting. And it's just noticing where you are in your environment. So what's something you can see, what's something you can smell, something you might taste, hear, what do you feel? And it's an actual practice to become embodied in the moment, where you can just do it at any time. You could be driving, just any time that you find yourself caught in thoughts of what if or why,
or panic,
backwards or forwards, or
Yeah.
panic. Just pause. What can I notice here? And you might even be able to tune into your body softening into that, because what is now is true. There's no arguing with what you see right now. What happened in the past could be a projection or a story that you made up about it. And what is to come in the future, you just don't know. So you're taking your best guess based on past experiences, which who knows if they'll apply to the future. So what is true is what is right now. And so that also helps us move forward with grace if we just take step by step. And I think that's just so important as a mom, step by step, day by day, moment by moment.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little. And you and I talked offline about the rules that we set for ourselves in our lives. Talk to me about rules and what childbirth has taught you about those rules in your life and your identity.
Yeah. And I think we touched on some, we talked about independence, don't ask for help, don't be a burden, take care of it yourself. Those were rules. And were they spoken to me like that? Not always, but you learn, as you navigate life. The first 7 years of a child's life is pretty formative. And I feel like we're growing, throughout our lifetime, but science tells us the first 7 years of a child's life are very formative. And, so you just absorb, how am I to be in this world, and what gets me what I need, which is this primitive need to survive, to belong to the tribe, to be loved, to be accepted, to belong. And so what I learned was, again, independence. Take care of yourself. Don't be needy. Don't ask for too much. Be polite. Don't be a burden. Take care of your own stuff. And then this idea that I am a knower, and I know things. And it's so funny because I got to this point in my preparation in my birth where I told my doula, I feel like I've set myself up for failure a little bit, because if something goes wrong, I'm going to blame myself, because I've put myself, I know so much that I feel like I should do well. It was some sort of performance or something.
Excellence. You're going to get a trophy at the end. Gold star.
Yeah, birth is not like that at all. No. And so I think what's also shifted is, yes, I can see myself as a seeker of knowledge and a holder of certain intelligences that I've come by, but also this knowing that there can be multiple truths. And that to not cling to, certain education or ways of thinking so much that it defines me.
Yeah.
And that there's this understanding that there's the gifts in the unknown. There's possibility in the unknown. Certain leaders like Dr. Joe Dispenza talk about the quantum realm quite a bit. And there's, infinite possibility to how things can go. And life isn't as much fun when it's planned down to, every moment.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's not so much fun when you try to control every moment either. It takes a lot of your life force away.
It's true. Yeah. It's exhausting. Truly exhausting.
Yeah.
So
it is.
I'm curious then, and maybe we'll wrap on this thought. And I don't know if there is an answer to this, so don't feel any pressure to have the right answer. But I think where it's hard in what you just said is we have anchors, we have identity points, we have rules that we've set for ourselves that shape and form our identity. And I understand the concept of evolving. I understand the concept of shifting and releasing. But I think where I get stuck is you have to have some level of values in your identity, but then equally hold them loosely. Like those two kind of concepts don't always seem to gel well. They seem in conflict with each other. What's your take on that?
I love that you asked this question, and I hope that I answer this in a way that makes sense. I'm just kind of, share what's coming up for me, but it's this idea that we have to be either or, this binary.
Yeah.
We have to be flexible and open and live in the gray area and know that we are going to change and evolve. And so there's this holding, but not grasping. And it's a concept in yoga, just like equanimity and this open palm, and it comes from Buddhism. Yeah. But it's this idea that there's a good and a bad, or a right and a wrong, and this binary, or even like, you can think of so many binaries, but just in general, a good and bad, a right and wrong, but it's like, according to who?
Yeah.
Yeah. And even your definition of that is going to evolve. And so you're going to have to let go of some of those identities as you go, or you're going to struggle, or you're going to come back to that question of, is this serving me anymore? And then you're going to have to let that go. And so you're going to have to let the palm open and let it drop. And then maybe another, idea lands in that same palm. Yeah. And I think there's also this idea of permission. You have to give yourself permission to let go of that and to be open to new. And so there's this level of authority that is needed, like self-governance and authority. Like, give yourself permission to move forward. No one's going to give you the permission to be who you are. You have to, they might say that, but you have to take that on yourself. You might have to make the decision to let go of who you once were, or take something else on, or, you determine how that's going to go and when. But I think it's another rite of passage for motherhood is this: you're no longer a child. You're no longer waiting for permission to do anything, to make any decisions. Right. You're now the guide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And you have the choice. Yeah. You do have the choice to make good decisions for not only yourself, but for your child, to guide them along as well. So if you're intrigued by what Nicole's talking about, I highly recommend check out her podcast. It's called Rebirth. And as we said at the top of the hour, it's all about helping women alchemize their birth stories and the stories that they bring to motherhood. So you can find that podcast anywhere where you're listening to this one as well. Or you can find their website, rebirthformothers.com, which, by the way, all the things we talk about in this episode, you can find over at our show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So, Nicole, as we wrap up, I have a few questions for you that I ask everyone. And thanks so much for your time today, and for your openness, because this is heavy stuff. It's big stuff here we're talking about.
That's what I'm here about. Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
So tell me, Nicole, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
I love this question, and I'm going to mention a Substack that I recently subscribed to. And it is poking holes in my belief system, challenging me, and inspiring me all at once.
Nice.
It is written by Peta Kelly, Peta Kelly, Kelly. She's an Australian woman, and it's called Peta Kelly and the Philosophies of Fra Arrow. And she calls it a living magazine for women to feel into, like, how good can it get? And how do we get there?
Amazing.
Within ourselves and for our families. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll link that up in the show notes for people if you guys want to check it out as well. So tell me, Nicole, who is one person in your network, somebody that you know personally that you just feel is up to brilliant things. We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
I am fortunate to have so many amazing women in my life that I would love to shine a spotlight on. But really who first came to mind is one of my first real mentors. She started as my yoga teacher, and then just our relationship evolved and deepened as her connection to herself and her work evolved and deepened. And her name's Elena Brower. And she, to me, just embodies depth in simplicity. We've talked about binaries, and she has been such an expander for me for what is possible to break out of the binaries that I held to be true. Like we talked about strength and softness and how you can be strong and also really graceful and be a really devoted mother and also a multifaceted, successful business owner and not just be defined by one skill like yoga. And she's an artist and an author and a poet, and she's multitudes. And I just feel very much inspired by her presence and how she's living. So
beautiful. Well, we will link her up in the show notes. If people are curious about the work she's doing out in the world, you can find it again over at the simplifierspodcast.com. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
After this snowstorm we just had, I'm grateful for the clear blue sky in front of me, something I'm observing as I orient to my space here. And fresh air, to be able to go outside after this and take a deep breath and feel the sun on my skin and just to, feel alive.
Beautiful. Yeah. So again, the podcast is called Rebirth. You can find it on any of your podcast players or go to her website, rebirthformothers.com. And you were saying that you were doing a course right now for birth stories. Tell us more about that service that you're going to offer in the future.
Yes. So through healing my own birth story, I found Pam England, who wrote Birthing from Within, and she has a school and a certification for teaching birth story listeners. So it's not therapy, but it's a way to specifically process your birth story in a way that you can feel heard and gain some different perspective and perhaps more self-acceptance from your story and carry that forward maybe differently into your motherhood and your history. And that's something that I started in August of 2021, and I am just starting now to take storytellers. So if that resonates with you, you can go to my website for more information.
Brilliant. So my final question for you today is this. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, somewhere in the world, and she is got a brand new baby in front of her as well. Her life has turned upside down in more than one way. What would you say to her right now, just to encourage her in this moment?
I would encourage her to close her eyes or focus on her baby, whatever feels natural to her, to put her hand over her heart space and tune out everything else, and just to feel the resonance of her heartbeat, the resonance between her and her baby, and trust that that's all she needs. To trust those instincts, to trust that as a guide for everything, and to know that she's got everything she needs.
Nicole, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary.